This is George Dionne with Metal Express Radio, and I'm here with Lee Aaron. How you doing today, Lee?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's a beautiful day. I live on the west coast of Canada, and it's like going to be 27-degree weather here today. Celsius.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say, that sounded a little low.
That's probably, I don't know, like 79, 80, something like that. Yeah, it's going to be nice.
If I knew absolutely nothing about Lee Aaron, how would you describe your music to me?
Melodic power rock with great female vocals. I don't know. Does that sound good? Like, I think I'm, somewhere between I don't know how to explain it. Joan Jett, Pink, and Lizzie Hale, if that makes any sense. It's not quite as heavy as, Hailstorm. Definitely not.
Right.
Not quite as pop as maybe Joan Jett, but it's somewhere in there. Very melodic, though. I love, my mission is always to write great songs that people can sing along to.
Right. I'd say melodic with strong guitars geared towards rock music.
Absolutely.
Probably 80s rock radio.
Yeah. Well, I'd say modern rock radio. Why not?
I think you could. Well, I got mixed feelings about modern radio. But speaking of radio, let's talk about your new album, Radio On, being released on Metalville Records July 23rd.
Yeah.
Your first single is Come On. Do you want to talk a little bit about that song?
Yeah, Come On is definitely one of the more melodic tunes on the album. But it's funny because my former guitar player from my previous work that I worked with for many years just texted me yesterday. He's like, man, those guitars kick ass. They're totally killer. So yeah, definitely some very cool guitar work going on this tune. And the song is all about, it's a summer driving tune. It's the kind of tune you want to crank up in your convertible and dance and sing along to. It's all about a second chance at love, which I think is a universal theme for a person of any age, really. You could be 20 going through a breakup and then falling in love with someone else, or you could be 50, and that's, to me, the challenge as I become a more mature artist is writing mature love songs because, let's be honest, if you're over 45 and you're writing about chicks and drinking still, please, So I wanted to write a song that was something that was relatable for everybody. And that trepidation that you feel when you're wondering, does someone feel the same way about me? And I've been burned in love before. Do I even want to take this chance again? And that's what Come On is all about.
Do you have another single planned in the near future?
We do. We have a single dropping this Friday. It's called 21, and it's the ballad on the album.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about your songwriting process with that one?
Sure. 21. I basically sat down at the piano one day and wrote it, and although my music has traditionally been almost solely guitar based, and there are guitars on the song. We got into the studio and I sat down at the Grand and I just started playing, and the boys in the band were like, you should just play piano on this one. I'm like, okay. So it's a piano-led ballad, but it is a rock ballad. And again, my songwriting process on this one was, in the last 5 years of rock history, we've lost a lot of wonderful artists that were dear and near to my heart, like Bowie, like Prince, Lemmy left us. And, that's just to name three. There have been slews of others. And I don't know, I was just kind of going through this real nostalgic feeling of, man, I guess none of us know how much time we have. Like Prince, he was, to me, he was still a young artist. He was not even 60 yet. And I was really taken aback when we lost him. And so it just got me thinking about a little bit about mortality and about how quickly time goes. And so 21 is sort of like a love song to my fans that have grown up with me. We've all lived through relationship breakups, becoming parents, the death of loved ones or parents, raising our kids, just the trials and tribulations of life. But then, we find ourselves looking back going, man, like all of this stuff has happened and time has gone so fast. But in my mind here, like, I don't know about you, I still feel like I'm in my early 20s. I still feel 21. Like, you go to a concert and you look around and you're going, who are these middle-aged people? And you're like, oh, they're us. Right? And then you're like,
absolutely.
I don't feel that way in my head and in my heart. So 21 is sort of like a young at heart love song for my fans, right? That have grown up with me.
So sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, the song Radio On, it kind of goes into mortality as well, where you say the line, you want to die with the radio on. Don't you think that radio has become a nostalgic thing these days? And today it's sort of more of, you can pick and choose.
When you say pick and choose, what do you mean exactly?
Like, I can listen to whatever I want at any time. I don't have to wait for my favorite song to come on the radio.
So in that respect, yes. So there's a couple of themes tied up with the song Radio On. There is the mortality, but what I was trying to do with Radio On was approach mortality in sort of a positive, fun way. I mean, let's be honest, no one's getting out of here alive. I mean, death is inevitable. We can be in denial about many other things in our life, but the fact that we're going to live forever is not one of them, right? But the beautiful thing about music is that even like when I think about these artists that I love that are no longer here, the music is immortal. Music is timeless. Music lives on no matter what. So music is like this gift that just keeps giving throughout decades and decades. And so I was sort of, I was thinking that, so if you're going to go out strong, die with the radio on, die with your favorite artists, saluting you. That's kind of what the song is about. So it's meant to be a very, very positive kind of message about, the legacy that you leave, right? Right.
And music is the soundtrack to our lives.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure.
You have a backing band. Who's currently in your backing band? I know your husband is. So who else?
So my husband, John Cody, is a Vancouver drummer who's played with a million different people. If you actually go to johncodyonline.com, you can see the list of bands he's played with, but he's played in mine the longest because we'll be looking at divorce if he doesn't. I'm just kidding. So yeah, he's one of my favorite drummers in the world anyway. I love his style, and I'm very fortunate to have him in my band. And so he's the drummer. Dave Reimer, my bass player, has been in my band 17 years. Dave, you may know him from, I don't know, where are you based out of? Now, that's a good question for me to ask you.
I am based out of the U.S.
Okay. So you might know who Lee Aaron is, but some of your listeners may not, is what you're, yeah.
Well, Metal Express is out of Norway.
Oh, okay. So, okay, well, they will know me in Norway. So Dave Reimer. Dave Reimer has played with Barney Bentall, but probably people would most know him for playing with Bryan Adams.
Right.
Right, Canadian Bryan Adams. Played with Bryan for a few years, and he's a great bass player and a great singer, and he's a great craftsman. He builds his own guitars, not only for himself, but for other people around the world. He builds like craftsman guitars. He's an amazing talent, this guy. And he's a great singer. So I'm very fortunate to have him in my band. And Sean Kelly is my guitar player. Sean is based out of Toronto. And Sean, they may know him in Norway for his work with Coney Hatch, Helix, Nelly Furtado. He was her guitar player for quite a few years. And Lee Aaron, he's been in my band for going on 8 years now. So, Yeah. And he's such a great player. I have the best band. I'm so lucky.
This is your first studio album on Metalville Records. You released a live album with them last year or the year before. How did your deal come about with Metalville?
Well, I have my own boutique label called Big Sister Records here in Canada. And what Big Sister does is I, as the head of the label, produce and create all my creative work within my own little box. So when Metalville, when we signed with them for distribution throughout the world, the album was finished. So they're not really creatively involved. They're involved more in the marketing, promotion, and yeah, we had offers from a few different labels, bigger offers actually than Metalville, but I loved what they did with Power Soul Rock and Roll, my Live in Germany, my live album. They did a bang up job, and of all the labels, I got to tell you, they were the most excited about the music. They are huge music fans, and I really have a lot of respect and admiration for that. And so I was very concerned about becoming a COVID acquisition, because a lot of labels were just signing stuff to just get it, to put it out, to keep themselves afloat during COVID times. But Metalville, they were jumping up and down about the music. They were like, we think this album is a masterpiece. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sign with you guys because you love the music. So, and that was important to me, that they're music fans, right?
Right. Speaking of fans, I found it difficult to kind of come up with questions for today because you answer a lot of them on your Instagram page every week. You answer your fans' questions, Q&A with Lee. So what I wanted to ask you is, what is the silliest question that you got, or question that you said, I just can't answer this?
The silliest question. Well, I don't like being put on the spot like this.
No one does.
I don't know. I've been asked weird questions about I know this sounds totally stupid, about my feet. There's one time I posted my feet. We were driving away on a summer vacation. I had my feet up on the dashboard, right? In the passenger seat. And I took a picture of my feet that had been nicely pedicured and said off to my summer vacation and blah, blah, blah. And then there was just all this stuff about my feet and people asking questions about my feet. And I'm like, get a life. This is weird. Other than that, people ask me things like, what's your guilty pleasure? What's your workout music? Which I don't feel so guilty about. I work out to the Bee Gees and Madonna because they make me motivated.
If music doesn't work out, Lee, I think you can make money off the feet thing. I hear it's a thing. So let's talk about you coming back to rock. You kind of went away a little bit, kind of did the jazz thing. You came back in 2016 with Fire and Gasoline. Was there an event or something that kind of gave you that itch again?
Well, I always knew that I would make more rock records and return to, what I had done for the majority of my career. When I took a diversion and I did jazz, in jazz and blues in the early part of the millennium, 2000 to 2004. Number one, I was, a couple of things were going on. I was in the middle of kind of having my kids, my son and our son and our daughter. And I was trying to stay local. Hair metal and corporate rock had kind of fallen out of favor with pop culture. Grunge it was all about grunge. And unfortunately, if you had any kind of career in the 80s and were associated even remotely with that style of music, you couldn't get arrested in the late 90s, right? So I found it just facilitated for me an environment where I wasn't bound by pop culture to have to make more rock records. I could do some experimenting. And contrary to what a lot of rock fans think, or I hate to say the word metal, but there seems to be this camp where they're like, oh, you cheated on us, Lee. You went and you did jazz and you defected from the rock camp. And it's like, no, what do you think Jimi Hendrix was playing like Howlin' Wolf and Chuck Berry licks, and then he just plugged his guitar in and turned it up to 11. Like, this is what Zeppelin did originally. This is what these bands that I grew up on that were my greatest influences, like the Who, Zeppelin, Hendrix, Heart, these were their influences. So this is really the roots of rock and roll. I felt like I went back and explored the history of rock music from the standpoint of what did the people that I love, who were their influences? So it's like I went back and explored that music again, and I feel like it made me a far better singer and songwriter and a more well-rounded artist. And so that was kind of a historical exploration into music, the roots of rock music that I did. And I don't regret it. I'm still really proud of it. I still love jazz and blues. I mean, you can't tell. When Miles Davis wore those fancy suits and turned his back on the audience to play trumpet, you're telling me that guy wasn't a rock star, my friend? Billie Holiday's lifestyle, she made Janis Joplin look like a lightweight. Trust me. And these guys were fighting against, segregation and racial issues at that time. This was heavy music, and a lot of people don't realize that, So I really had a lot of fun doing that in my career. And then, again, I always knew I would come back and make another rock record, but what it really took, truthfully, is it took my children being old enough that I felt like I could finally not have to, they could actually put their pajamas on and brush their teeth at night by themselves. And I'm like, hey, I can write a record now, they can go into the cupboard on their own, rather than, I realized that I didn't want my children to end up in therapy when they were 30 by being the kind of mother that was never around. So I focused about a decade of my life into raising them. And I mean, I'm still doing it, but now they can appreciate that mom has a passion that she loves, right?
Right. So in the early 80s, in the late 80s, you weren't marketed much in the U.S. Was there a particular reason for that?
Absolutely. A lot of people ask me that question. And when I was like 19 years old and I signed my deal with Attic Records, Attic distributed by A&M in Canada, I didn't understand a lot about the music business at that time. And my first manager was like, yeah, this is a good deal. We went and saw a lawyer and they're like, yeah, this is a pretty good deal. And I'm like, I'm going to get a record deal. I was just so excited, Attic Records owned my worldwide licensing rights. So that meant if I was to get distribution in the States, I did not personally, or my management company, have the ability to just sign me to Atlantic Records if they were interested. They had to buy my licensing rights from Attic Records, Attic A&M in Canada. And what happened to me repeatedly was that the label I was on didn't want to let me go. And I had interest multiple times from Geffen, labels in LA, Atlantic, EMI, I believe at one point out of New York wanted to sign me. And, but my label wanted a label deal. They're like, you want this, one of our leading artists on your label? Well, how would you like to take our whole roster to distribute it in the States? And they're like, well, we'd like to take Lee Aaron and Triumph and this band, but we don't want your whole roster. And they're like, well, sorry, you can't have just her. And then in the early 90s, the head of my label in Canada was trying to start Attic America. And they needed like $5 million in investments, and they always fell a little bit short of being able to get it off the ground. So that is the main reason why I never got released in America, except as an import.
Well, I discovered you when everything was readily available on the internet. Once YouTube started coming through and streaming and whatever, that's how I found Lee Aaron, and probably a lot of people in the U.S.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool. Well, I mean, the beauty of today is that you don't really have to just get a label signing out of the US or whatever. I can sign to a German label and know, like I'm with Amp Distribution in North America and Rough Trade in Europe. So I know that the album will, with the internet, the album is everywhere, right? And that's a beautiful thing.
So everybody asks you about Metal Queen. I want to ask you about Bodyrock. That is one of the best albums I've ever heard. It's like your hysteria, I think. It's the production is great, the songs are great, everything's great. Do you remember how it kind of all came together?
Yeah, well, I'll just try to make it brief, but in a nutshell, we had a big American producer. I might as well just tell you his name. His name, Pat Glasser, who produced Night Ranger, was very interested in producing us. He'd come up and had a meeting with our label, and we were in this boardroom. We had this big meeting, and we had done a whole bunch of demos for Bodyrock, and basically he said, yeah, I love this band. I think she's got a great voice, and John's a great guitar player, and I've got some great songs, but these demos, I'm not really hearing it. And so the label, we finished this meeting, and the label, they're like, yeah, this guy really, Pat Glasser really wants to produce your record. And we're like, he doesn't like any of our songs. We're like, maybe he's not the right guy. Like, I know he's a great producer and he did great things with Night Ranger, and I have nothing bad to say about him, but maybe if he doesn't like our material, he's not the right guy. Or maybe, a lot of these producers were like, oh, cute girl singer, and, I can just find her a bunch of songs that maybe I own the publishing on, or I don't know. I don't really know what the dynamic was, but we were like, no, that's not going to happen. So the label was not very happy with us. And they said, well, we're not giving you $250,000 to do this album. Here's $60,000. Go make your record. Now, $60,000 in 1989 was a tiny budget. It's huge today, but tiny back then. And we're like, well, we're just going to do this record ourselves with our A&R guy, Brian Allen. Brian Allen was sort of riding on the success of What About Love, Heart. He had co-written that song. So we went into the studio with Brian, and we didn't even have a budget for, like, literally extra players. So we're like, okay, what are we going to do? So we brought this programmer guy named Scott Humphreys up from LA. No, actually, he was in Toronto at the time. And we're like, okay, I guess we're programming all the bass and drums ourselves. So we literally, that was one of the first albums. It was programmed with, was it a Fairlight or one of those things back then? And anyway, yeah, we did all the programming on that album ourselves, and John played all the guitars. And I think we finally ended up with a little bit of money to bring some background vocalists in to help us out on that album. But basically that album was a real purist vision for me and John Albany. And for many people, it's their favorite album. So that's how that album came about. And we recorded the song we wanted to record.
Well, it certainly sounds better than a $60,000 budget. I'll tell you that much.
60.
Yeah, 60,000. It's much bigger than that.
Thanks.
Do you have a tour that you're starting to put together for the new album?
So we have a bunch of dates, let me tell you. Right now, most of them have been pushed into 2022. We have 1 or 2 Canadian dates that are pushed into the fall right now. So we are going to be out there doing shows when it's safe. That's all I can really tell you. I know that they've postponed the Monsters of Rock cruise we were on until February 22, 2022. We just thought we would wait until the next year. I don't know that I feel 100% safe at this point getting on a boat that soon. We decided to be safe, but better safe than sorry. Again, we do have shows. When it is completely safe, we're going to go out there and start doing shows. We're going to be at Sweden Rock. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so we're very excited to get back out there on the road. Let me tell you, it's been a year of writing songs and working on stuff. But yeah, I really miss playing live. But it's just a matter of waiting until the world opens up, right? Right. Yeah.
And I read that you're actually working on your next album.
Yeah. We've written about half of it. So
Okay.
I've been a little bit sidelined by doing videos and all these interviews, but yeah, we're already working on material for the new record. I'm very excited. And Mike Fraser is going to mix it and engineer for us. So.
And you have a reissue of Metal Queen that is coming out for Record Store Day on June 12th, I think it is.
Yeah, pink vinyl. It's pretty cool.
Is it going to be in America, or is it just a Canadian record store thing?
Are they going to have it in brick and mortar stores in America? Probably not. However, it's like you can Amazon anything. Come on.
That's true.
So can you get it in America? Yes, you can. You've got a computer in that house, you can get it. So the beautiful thing about this re-release, which is cool, is it's coming out on pink vinyl, bright pink vinyl, which is really exciting. And the other thing, I love that is such a statement to what the feminist statement of that album was. Like the whole Metal Queen was about, the matriarchy. It was about women being able to be equal with men, being in, holding positions of power, and being for women to be empowered. And I love that the pink vinyl in itself, I think, makes such a feminist statement. I just love it. So that's coming out on June 12th.
And on July 23rd is your latest studio album, Radio On. I'm looking forward to picking up the vinyl copy of that one. And I wish you the best of luck, and thank you for talking to Metal Express Radio today.
Awesome. Well, George, it was lovely talking to you, and I hope we get to talk again soon.